Okay, welcome back to another author interview at Crystal Lake. And today our guest is Brad Ricks, and we are here to talk about his sequel, The Night Crew 2 Bloodlust. Great title, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Uh, and I'm going to turn it over to him now, let him introduce himself. So take it away.
All right. Well, it's nice to be back on the show. I appreciate having me on. So yeah, my name's Brad, and this is my second book now with Crystal Lake. The first one came out back in February, and now this one here mid-November. So super excited to have the follow-up and subsequent books that will be coming out.
Okay, so tell everyone a quick overview of the book.
All right. So in the Night Crew 2, so my little ragtag team of monster hunters, they're faced with a brand new challenge, as you would do in any sequel. There's a whole new dynamic now that Mike, who's the main character from the first one, is part of the team. So now, spoiler, if you haven't read book one, which has been out since February, so I don't know why you haven't if you haven't. But Mike is kind of coping with now that he's a vampire. So he's been coping with that. And amongst all their internal turmoil, there's kind of the bigger picture of stuff that's happening. That's kind of the series arc of stuff. And because of that bigger arc, there's these creatures that everybody kind of thought were extinct, but now they've decided to come out of hiding and they're leaving a trail of bodies in New Orleans. And so the team is having to cope with both their internal, new dynamics, Mike having to figure out how to deal with the fact that he's a brand new vampire, and now they're on the hunt to try to save try to stop this creature that's in New Orleans.
Okay, so obviously some of the inspiration is vampires.
Of course, yes.
But what other inspirations did you draw on for the sequel?
So part of it kind of started with the setting. So it is set in New Orleans, the Big Easy. It's one of my favorite cities, and so it wasn't that long ago I had visited, and I was like, I'm gonna at some point set a story here. And when I kind of had the idea of what kind of creature I wanted to for the team to have to go after, it kind of fit it kind of fit the vibe and the setting that New Orleans kind of fit that. And so that was a kind of a big inspiration for me, was just that city itself. And plus it alone has a lot of vampire lore that's already in the city. I mean, there's Vampire Cafe and there's like all this stuff that's already there. So it kind of felt right to expand the Night Crew verse or the Night verse, whatever you want to call it, to kind of expand that lore, and do it inside of inside of NOLA.
Yeah, New Orleans definitely has a supernatural vibe to it, and yeah, I can see why you'd want to set something there. I mean, I
I
myself have toyed with the idea, but I've not yet done it. So,
on the podcast I did an episode talking about vampire lore in New Orleans. And on that episode I called New Orleans the goth city of America, because of it's if you think of all the cities, that one's our little goth kid over here.
so how are the characters evolving from book one to book two?
Well, so there is the new dynamic, with Mike now being part of the team. So there's kind of a new just dynamic amongst the team. Some of the members are still the same. A couple of them have gone off to do other things, like Jax and Thomas. And so in book one, I did it in a first person because I wanted the reader to really, you're introduced to the world right through Mike's eyes. And so he's new to it. You're new to it. Heck, I was new to it. So, so everybody, you're kind of learning it like that. With book two, I decided to do it in third person because I want you to be able to learn more about some of the other members. So, in doing that, I feel that you could get closer to each character a little better, because I didn't have to stay in Mike's head. I can jump around. You get some backstory on Nate and Nikki, and so you get to learn the characters more.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, tell us a little bit about the new antagonist. What challenges are they bringing?
So there's been a handful of reviews that have already kind of come out, so I guess I can go ahead and say it. So the new antagonist, so I decided to do a creature that you don't see a lot of, but it's a succubus, and actually four of them, so it would be succubi. Um, so and I went back to more kind of ancient lore, with the main antagonist being Lilith herself. So back to the first wife of Adam and all that kind of stuff. Um, so it's Lilith. There's actually, in some of the research I was doing, there was actually like four main kind of succubi and that kind of came up through a lot of the different religions, and that was Lilith. There's one called Agrat Bat Malet. See how well I can remember these names. Ishith and Nema. And I'm sure I butchered each and every one of those names, but except for Lilith, that one I think I got right. But um so all four of them are there. They've kind of lived through the centuries in hiding, and they're old, they're powerful, and they have some really kind of wickedly cool abilities like mind control, for instance. And so I wanted the creatures to be as strong, if not stronger, than Mike. That was kind of the main hurdle that with kind of doing a second book and having some kind of a supernatural character like Mike being a vampire and having the abilities of a vampire. You got to up the stakes, and so some of the problem, it's kind of like some of the problem with superhero movies. It's like, how strong does something have to be to actually beat Superman? So I wanted to try to do something that he wouldn't be immune to, as well as any of the other characters. And so I kind of landed on doing a succubus, and I thought it'd be fun to kind of play around with.
Mm. Yeah, that's interesting, and it's also kind of funny because I use some of the Lilith mythology in one of the books I'm writing, but she's the first vampire in
So
my book.
I kind of there's a scene where I kind of do joke about that. They no longer need, or kind of, it's almost like they're almost an evolved vampire, in that they no longer need blood. They're existing on like pure life force kind of thing. It's not where, oh no, you don't have to bite a neck and have all this. It's just they kind of drain people of their actual, almost their essence. And so they almost look down on the vampires like, y'all still need blood. And so it is kind of like they're kind of very they are very vampiric, if I can get all my V's in there. But yeah, like I said, but kind of more almost like that second evolution of.
Cool. So some authors find writing the second book in the series kind of daunting. Some just slip right back into the world. So how was the experience for you?
So I really enjoy this universe. And so it was real easy to kind of slip back into it. It's I mean, really, for the most part, it's our world. It's just all the creatures are real. Every kind of creature of the night is real. So writing it was real fun to do, and the characters themselves, they're a blast to write. I as I was finishing up this one, I was already looking to, what's the next adventure I want to put them on. So they always kind of they kind of hang out in the back of my head all the time. So I don't know if I'm ever really truly out of that world. so so slipping back into it is not it's not hard to do, because like I said, it is one I enjoy writing it. There's so many different possibilities and angles I can take, and so it's I'm always kind of thinking about what should I do in the next book, and what should I do in the one after that, and what's it so so yeah,
Yeah.
so getting back into it wasn't it wasn't very hard at all.
Yeah, when the characters are sitting in the back of your head talking to you, yeah, it's pretty easy to get back into the book.
Yeah, and like I said, they're a fun group to write about. I mean, they have a nice little dynamic and a click, and they have their sense of humors, and um, I mean, a lot of it, especially some of their sarcasticness, is definitely pulled straight from me. So it kind of flows pretty easy. So they're fun to write.
Yeah, yeah, some of my characters have my snarkiness too. So, what would you like your readers to take away from the novel?
um, Mainly, I mean, I want them to fall in love with the characters, and with each book, hopefully even, each book just a little bit more. Um, I want them to, really take away feeling how much of a team they are and how, they're kind of growing together as a family. It really is the whole storyline in this. Mike is the main character, and you're kind of growing and learning with him, but at the same time, it's like, I mean, he's he's the newbie of the family, and so he's learning how to mesh and find his place in this world. So yeah, so my main takeaway, I mean, I want people to, I want my readers to have fun with it and love the adventures and fall in love with the characters.
Okay, so what was the hardest scene? Sorry, that's the next question, not this one. What was your favorite scene to write in the book?
um, so favorite scene in this book. So there are two of them. It's probably two favorites I have, and I know when I saw your questions and I saw this one, I was like, maybe I'll choose. I'm like, nah, never mind. I'm not going to choose which one. I know there's two of them, and both of them are fight scenes. I do like doing fight scenes. It's kind of fun. And one of them is when the team kind of first encounters one of the succubi, um, and and with that one, uh, it mainly it's Nate and Nikki have to kind of step up and do stuff, but a lot of it is just they kind of layered in sense of humor that they have. Like Mike makes a comment with during that fight, because he's griping because she threw him through a wall, and so he's definitely like doing the whole. I don't- Is it okay to cuss on here? I don't know, but but he's probably like that. He's pretty much like that B word threw me through a wall, and or threw me through two by fours. And so, there's just that kind of snarky sense of humor. So that was the first one, and then the other was another fight scene that is mainly just Nate and Nikki. They're walking through the French Quarter. They're um, mainly just kind of the two of them just hanging out and just going for a walk. And so that one was fun to write because I myself was kind of remembering back to walking, the French Quarter and seeing some of the different stuff. A lot of if you have a map and as you're reading it, you can kind of follow along with where they're going. I tried to keep most of the stuff, especially around the French Quarter and all that. I tried to keep very true to form, um, and and so it was fun to kind of be able to write that and again kind of think back just from my own times of visiting the city during that same time. And then they things happen and they get into a bunch of fight with a bunch of people. So
Okay, so now what was the hardest scene that you had to write in the book?
so the hardest scene was probably some of the stuff that I had to do at the beginning. So early in the book, not necessarily the opening scene, there's always that kind of opening kill and all that kind of stuff. But after that, when I'm getting into, Mike and learning his new abilities, um, I I wanted to give a quick refresher of some of the stuff that happened in book one, but not like beat the readers over the head with it. So um it's a kind of it was the first time. I mean, it's the first kind of series and stuff that I've written, so it was the first time doing something like that where it's like I'm doing a little throwback but not a lot, and so trying to find that balance was really hard. There was times I would write and then I'd read back over it and I go, no, this is a little bit too much exposition and it's not moving the story very forward. I have to, it's more looking backwards, and so trying to kind of balance that, how to remind the readers what happened in book one without it being like, a not without being a couple page summary of what happened in book one. So that from a writing standpoint was kind of it was definitely challenging. Because again, like I said, I didn't want to beat the readers over the head with, here's what happened in book one. But I still wanted to give some kind of a reminder of the things that had happened.
Yeah, that's always tricky. It's just how much do you recap, and how do you recap without having it seem like, okay, this is
It,
boring.
right, and you don't want momentum to stop. You
Yeah.
want, I mean, especially because this, I try to get the stories to start off moving. It is action horror, and so I want that. I want it to be moving forward. I want things to be happening and progressing. But when you do a lot of, introspection or thinking back, or you're thinking back in time, you've kind of paused, everything that's currently going on. And so I want to do a little bit of reminder, but not really pause the forward progression of the story.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So, what is it about vampire lore that interests you?
Vampires have always been my favorite. They are that kind of perfection of a, the creature perfection kind of thing to me. Um, it's every time when you think about vampires, it's always the Bela Lugosi or the Christopher Lee and the that the Count, and so it's that I always just enjoy, that aspect of it, the kind of suave, debonair, piece of it. Um, but there's kind of so much that can you can toy with the lore. Not only that, just because it's every every culture kind of has their own iteration of vampire lore and things, and what how the vampire is represented. But even over, from us, it has changed. Every decade seems to, yeah, seems to be some kind of a new iteration. um Even in the movies, you have like back in the 50s and 60s, you had a lot of the like the Hammer films, and everything was technicolor, and it was like, look how red, the blood is. But then you get into the 70s, and you start getting like some of the disco influence and like Blackula, and then you get in the 80s and you get into rock, and you get Lost Boys and leather and that kind of stuff. So it's like it changes, and it's every generation, like I say, kind of they kind of interject, or it kind of inject its own kind of what's going on at the times into vampires. And I don't you don't really get that from a lot of other horror stuff. A haunted house is a haunted house, and it's always a something that died back in the 1800s, and and
Mm.
um or you have, the werewolf is a werewolf, and zombies are always, looking to eat brains. And so you don't really get a lot of change, but where it seems like the vampire and vampire lore, it it just kind of keeps kind of morphing and changing over the years.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you can have scary, evil vampires, or you can have the romantic vampires if you want to go the
We're not going to
paranormal
talk about
route.
the disco balls.
But yeah, so I mean, yeah, you can do a lot of things with the vampire, because there's kind of like this evil, erotic whole thing with vampires from the beginning. So yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, even I took when I started doing the Night Crew, and I was like, because with any kind of book like this, the first thing you want to do, or any kind of series like this, is it's almost like if you're writing fantasy. The first thing you do is map out what your magic system is. Well, I wanted to map out what my lore was going to be with vampires. And I went back and I reread Dracula, because I was like, I'm gonna ignore all the stuff that we've added since the all everything that Hollywood has added. I want to kind of ignore and just kind of go back to Bram Stoker's Dracula. And even in that, there is this kind of um you know almost eroticism to it. You have the wives that were going after Harker, and you had just the relationship with Lucy and Mina, and the Count. And so there's this constant, like, it wasn't erotic, but it hinted at it a lot.
Yeah. I mean, some of the original myths don't really have that, but yeah, Dracula has definitely kind of introduced that element to it. Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah, because you get back into some of the things like in Romania and the Strigoi and those kind of things, and they are like bloated corpses, and you get into more. It was all kind of, it was like the progression of what happens to a corpse. It's just that people at the time didn't understand it. And so they would dig up a corpse. It would look like a certain thing, a certain bloatedness, and it was pale, but the fingernails kept growing because that's what they do. And the hair grows, but your gums recede, which makes your teeth now look, bigger. And so you had these things that, again, it wasn't sexy. That was, vampire to them. It wasn't until you had John Palladori's the vampire, and then you had, then from it, you had from the vampire, you end up with Count Dracula, and that kind of becomes the initial progression that really turned it into, being something that wasn't meant to be a sex symbol kind of thing, to turning it into an aristocrat. I think really Palladori did probably a lot of the heavy lifting on that, only because he based his vampire on Lord Byron.
Yeah, you can't avoid the erotic stuff with Lord Byron.
Right. So yeah, and so in doing that, I think he kind of initially did a lot of the heavy lifting that then Stoker kind of worked off of, and in what he did.
Yeah, definitely. So, have you branched out into any other genres of other than horror?
I have not in my published works. I will say, so when I first sat down and I was like, I want to write, a book and see if I can write a book. I actually I did a little action adventure book. I'd say little, it was like 300 pages, but it was kind of the first large novel kind of thing I wrote outside of a short story. And it was very much like a Dan Brown meets Indiana Jones type of thing. And it was fun to write. It wasn't very good, but it was, how I kind of learned. It was the learner novel. So it was, it helped me to know what to and what not to do. And so, I kind of set that away, and it probably won't ever see the light of day. But if I ever did something that wasn't horror, it would probably be something along those lines. I minored in archaeology, so I mean stuff like ancient Egypt and Rome and Atlantis and that kind of stuff. I'm a geek when it comes to that stuff. So it would probably be something along the National Treasure, Indiana Jones type of story if I was to do something that was not horror.
No, you could always do an action adventure Roman vampire novel.
I'll have to keep that in mind.
Okay, so what's your favorite aspect of being a writer?
Well, I love storytelling. So, that piece alone, it's, even if I wasn't writing, I still did storytelling. I did songwriting, which is pretty just another form of storytelling. I've done that for a while. So, it's probably one of my favorite parts, is just being able to create worlds that, for other people to kind of slip into and forget about reality for a while. And, it's so that part is great. I'm also, a little bit of an extrovert, so I also like meeting readers, doing different events. I've had a chance to meet a lot of great readers and fans, and they've either online we'll chat, or they'll come up to my table at different events, and we just kind of geek out over random stuff. And it's awesome. I've talked to people about publishing and about writing and about random stuff and movies and Atlantis and just anything that suits. And it's great. Like I said, I enjoy chatting with people, so that part's fun. And like I said, being able to create worlds that other people then, later I see online, people are like, oh my god, I can't wait for the second. I can't wait to dive back into this world. I'm like, oh, me too. So I mean that kind of stuff. When you see that and people are so excited about the next generation of what the next story is going to be in that world. I mean it's a great feeling.
Yeah, definitely. So, what are some of your favorite vampire books?
Well, Dracula for certain. I mean, it's been a favorite of mine since the first time I've read it, and I think I've read it 3 or 4 times now. And so I've always enjoyed it. Salem's Lot is another one that was one of the first Stephen King books that I read. And so that's always been a one that's been a favorite of mine. Lately, I enjoyed the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. So the Grady Hendrix one, I thought that was fun. So yeah, those are some decent ones.
Okay.
And the Strain trilogy. So I read it, and I liked that it was a different take on vampires. And with his main character being somebody that works for the CDC, it was a different, seeing it from more of a clinical, like a disease standpoint, was kind of an interesting take on that vampire origin and vampire lore kind of stuff. So I enjoyed that one as well.
Good books, all of them.
Yeah.
So tell us about some of the other books you've written.
So outside of the Night Cruise series, I have 2 others that have been published. Both of them actually came out before Night Crew. My debut novel, which was it's called Fear Not the Dead. It's a psychological thriller, but it takes place in a haunted house. So there's a lady who she experienced some trauma in her youth, and her father just recently passed away, and so a lot of this trauma is kind of resurfacing. And her therapist, who may or may not be a real therapist, is talks her into revisiting the spot where a lot of her initial drama when she was a kid happened. And but neither of them know that place is haunted. So it reads a lot like a cat and mouse thriller. But being in a haunted house, it definitely has that kind of horror first kind of aspect to it. Here she's already thinking she's crazy, and shadows move when they're not supposed to, so that doesn't really help the psyche very much.
Yeah.
So that was the first book that I wrote. Well, that was the first book I had published. And then a couple months after that, I wrote a fun little Christmas book called To Hell with Hallmark. It is so by the way, so that laugh is usually when I'm like I'm sitting at my booth. I made t-shirts for To Hell with Hallmark, and they have a nice little gingerbread man who, he's kind of waving, but it says To Hell with Hallmark on it. So people will typically see that and they'll start laughing, and that's usually the first thing they see. And I'm like, once they start laughing, I'm like, oh, come on, I know you want to ask about it. And that's how it does. It's always my hook. So
yeah, it's a good hook.
It is a great hook. So it's 11 short stories that they all take place in the town of Hallmark, and each one it kind of sets up as a wonderful, beautiful little Hallmark Christmas movie, and then I give them the ending that they really deserve. So if you've ever watched a Hallmark Christmas movie and you were thinking these, the bad things need to happen to these people, you should read the book. So it's definitely a fun one. It all happens, like I said, in the same town. So you'll see characters from one story pop up in another story. Although each story is self-contained, there are some overlaps in some of the stuff that happens. And mainly from just a character standpoint, like one character will focus on one story will focus on a particular character. The next story, there'll be a background character. And so, there, I do this little interplay between them. Very similar to the Halloween movie Trick or Treat, where it all kind of takes place on Halloween night, and you have all these stories that kind of interlace together. So I designed it very much off of that.
Okay, so what are you currently working on, and what's coming up in the future?
So currently, there's two things I'm doing currently. One is I'm editing, or I'm going through and putting in edits and all that for the Night Crew 3, which should be coming out, I think, around July timeframe of 26. So, although, 2 is about to come out, I'm currently working on 3. Well, it's already been written. Now I'm going back and fixing all the thousands of mistakes that I have in there. Um,
All those pesky typos.
Oh Lord Almighty. It's funny when you're going back and reading your edits and you can see like mid sentence where you changed your thought and you're like, oh, the beginning of the sentence and the end do not go together.
Yeah. And when you accidentally put the wrong word in and it changes the entire meaning of the sentence, and it's definitely something you don't want in the book.
Well, there's times like I could tell that I started to write the sentence thinking I was going to be talking about like the team or the whole crew did something. And then I go back and I'm like, oh no, I just want it to be this one person. So I didn't change the one person, but I don't touch any other, any other verb or anything else in the sentence. And so there's a whole bunch of, the noun verb mismatching. And it's like this word is singular, but that verb is plural. And
Yeah.
this stuff like that. As you're reading it, you're like, "Ooh,
Yeah.
that's in its hurt."
My latest book had a lot of things I had changed into thought, like lines that I had changed into thought as I was editing. Only I did not change the past tense to present tense. So my editor actually put a note that the thought dialogue supposed to be present tense, and I'm going, yes, I know this is not unknown to me. Just my brain does not want to do it.
Well, and it's funny, like it doesn't matter how many times you read it, like
Mhm.
you read it how you intended it. But then once once you get the notes back and you're like, oh, it's like,
Yeah, exactly.
you
What
know,
was I thinking?
yeah, it's like, oh, that doesn't go right, does it? No. Um, so yeah, so I'm currently doing that, but then I also have another standalone novel that I'm currently working on. That I'm about 25,000 words into it right now. So hopefully another couple months, and I'll have it cranked out and kind of see where it goes. So that one, it's not connected to the Night Crew. It's just a standalone book that I have it taking place in Siberia because I thought that would be a fun place.
Yeah,
Siberia in the winter.
yeah, that's definitely a horror story. Okay, so I think we'll wrap the interview up here. Thank you for being a guest. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
You as well. I appreciate it.
Okay, and that's it for this episode. And bye for now, everybody.